So welcome to our panel, Our Culture in Nuestras, Escuelas, the battle for ethnic studies in Tucson, Arizona. And thank you so much for being here. I'm really honored and humbled to be sitting next to all of these people. My name is Kay Galarza. I'm currently a senior in high school. I just started my senior year. And a bit about me, I currently sit or work in Students and Educators for Equity, formerly the Youth Technical Assistance Center for Addressing Disproportionality here at NYU Metro Center. And we do research, conduct data and analysis on disproportionality surrounding anything from academics to segregation, but we work really closely with our sister team, Youth Restorative Justice. I also sit on the panel for educational policy. The Chancellor Student Advisory Council, Borough Student Advisory Council, a lot of things. Basically, I've been in this work for a while, not nearly as long as these people have, and I'm here to learn and also just reflect on my own times and the times that I'm currently going through in the classroom. And speaking of ethnic studies, I'm reflecting really deeply on how any time I've sat in a classroom, the only time that I've seen my identity is through the light of colonization, or through the light of how my people have been suppressed, or oppressed, or harmed, or hurt, or killed. I'm Puerto Rican and I'm Filipina, and so the theme of colonization is very strong and very present there. But I'm also from the Valley in McAllen, Texas, near the border of Mexico, and I lived there and I moved to New York about 3 years ago. So this idea of ethnic studies is something that I'm really trying to wrap my head around, and I'm really trying to see how their work can be a foundation for New York City schools here and the Department of Education anywhere. So with that, I'm going to give some formal introductions of our panelists before they give you the real them. So Cristina V. Villarreal, proudly born and raised in the Bay Area. Hey! Dr. Cristina V. Villarreal spent nearly a decade teaching and learning with the youth of East Oakland, California, where she taught middle school social studies. She then served as an assistant principal at Castlemont High, where she successfully led the design and implementation of a 9th grade ethnic studies course. Currently, Villarreal serves as the director of the teacher education program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She also serves as a radical healing trainer with Flourish Agenda and as a consultant with Acosta Educational Partnership. Her research explores enactments of humanizing pedagogies, racial literacy, and radical healing in social studies classrooms through portraiture. We're also having a translation, so I apologize for speaking too fast. We're just going to keep that in mind. Dr. Curtis Acosta was a high school teacher for nearly 20 years in Tucson, where he developed and taught Chicanx and Latinx literature classes for the Mexican American Studies program. Dr. Acosta's current passion is assisting educators in the application of community and culturally sustaining pedagogy in combination with humanizing teaching practices in order for youth of color and all students to reach their academic potential. Dr. Acosta is the founder of Acosta Latino Learning Partnership and Acosta Educational Partnerships, educational consultation firms committed to help educators create empowering and engaging pedagogical practices in their classrooms, schools, and communities. He is also an assistant professor at the University of Arizona. Woo! And next, Sean Arce is a high school ethnic studies teacher in South Central Los Angeles. and was the co-founder and former director of Mexican American Studies Department in Tucson, Arizona. As an activist, urban educator who has worked in public schools for 20 years, Arce believes that what made his colleagues and himself effective was the implementation of a barrio pedagogy. Within this innovative and transformative pedagogy, indigenous knowledge and social justice frameworks were utilized, and students and teachers co-constructed an educational experience that fostered strong academic and cultural identity. Arce is a co-founder of the Chicanx Institute for Teaching and Learning, serves as an education consultant, and is a professor of Chicana and Chicano studies at California State University. And with that, I'm going to transition into giving Dr. Acosta and Gadiel their time to introduce the Ethnic Studies mixtape.
All right.
Ready?
Yes. Let's do this. So, we're really excited to meet you all. You heard a little bit about us, but before we dive into a conversation, we'd like to hear more from folks in the room and get you thinking about your relationship with yourselves, with your ancestors, and with ethnic studies. So this is an activity that comes from our dear, dear sister scholar, Farima, Dr. Farima Porkhorshid, who teaches at University of San Francisco and also does ethnic studies work. So with this activity, we need everybody to stand up.
Wait, check it out first though. Look at this.
Oh, yes, you guys see this.
Oh,
wait, my bad.
Yeah.
Some folks may not know what that is.
For you young people, that's a cassette tape.
Yes.
Used to listen to our KRS-One on there, little BDP.
And so oftentimes we don't like to just talk about, right, some of the work that we've done. We want to have a chance for you to experience it and to also think about what songs might you bring into like your classrooms and your spaces in even your homes. And so this is just one of ours. So what you're going to see, we just picked some lyrics from artists that we love, and we're going to ask one of you to read the lyrics and the prompt. Then we're going to play the song and hope that you move around and dance, think about the lyrics, think about your answers, and when the music stops, you'll pair up and share your answers. All right? You ready? Yes. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I had to add swag. It was missing.
All right. Who are we looking at? Queen. Yes. So, which song is this from? So, Formation, right? She says, I got hot sauce in my bag, swag. So, we want you, as you're listening to her start her song, we want you to think about something that you carry to represent your identity and your swag. But we also want you to think about something that your ancestors would have carried. Wow. All right? So these are the things we want you thinking of as the music plays. And just use the space. You can eventually make your way back to your seat, but we're going to be moving around for a while. So
when the music stops, did you say that part already? Because I was just doing stuff.
When the music stops, go ahead.
When the music stops, you're gonna just like musical chairs, except without the competition part.
Yes.
So you don't have to be diving in each other's ankles and knees, and we don't need any of that. I'm old. My knee hurts right now. So when the music stops, you're gonna pair up with another person, right? You gotta find another person. It'd be preferable you find somebody you don't know, and you introduce yourself, and then you're gonna answer those two questions that you've been thinking about during the song. Any questions? All right, are you sure? All right, here we go. You gotta mix it up. You gotta start moving.
No, you have to dance. We all have
So that was supposed to take 15 minutes. But we really knew it was going to take that long. We just didn't tell Megan because we know how much fun this is. You want to say anything?
I just think it's also right. We like to start with that to remind you so much of how much like knowledge and wealth is in this room right now, and we're already bringing that. And so much of us, we're already carrying it with us, and our ancestors have already passed it down. And to just keep that in mind with all the work that we're doing moving forward. So we really thank you for leaning into the activity because the energy in the space is really beautiful and very healing right now. So thank you.
So with that, I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves and just ask this fundamental question of how you fell in love with ethnic studies and what role does it play in your life now, but what really was that journey for all of you? That's a long question.
What's the start?
Yeah, if y'all don't mind if I stand up, it's tough to sit down. It's tough to sit down. Do I need to use the?
Ask them.
I can project. Can y'all hear me? Go, please. Okay, yes.
It might be lunch.
Yeah, how did I fall in love with ethnic studies? I was fortunate in Oakland. I had a Black Studies class that I took, and my teacher was also one of the football coaches. So while I did not see my personal family's history or my community's history, I was able to draw those parallels. But it wasn't until I went to the university, right? Well, I actually saw myself. Well, I actually, read a book for the first time, from front to back. And so, through seeing yourself in the curriculum, it's very much in line with this principle and this Mesoamerican philosophy of Tezcatlipoca. And Tezcatlipoca is looking at himself and validating himself and seeking that historical memory. So that was when these books were introduced, when these people, these profes, were up there speaking about our history, our distinct history as Mexican people, as Chicanas, Chicanos, Chicanx, right? That was very validating. So I fell in love with it. So I would never be caught dead with the book in my hand walking around. But after those classes, after those Chicano studies classes, it was like, okay, I have this book here. I'm carrying around a book, Occupied America, whereas never before would I have an identity that was I was so connected to and so proud of. So in that moment, it was a liberatory moment, because I drew the conectas with my familia, with my abuelos, right? With my nanas, my tatas, and with my parents. Because this schooling, we're very well schooled as colonized peoples. So our parents were dehumanized, deculturalized. And so this opened a door for me to further communicate and to further love myself, my community, my parents, right? And so that was, that's how I found ethnic studies. And then at the same time, within our community in Tucson, it was coming off the tail end of the crack explosion, so there was a lot of gang violence. And so as an active member in MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, we went out into the barrios and worked with the young youth, with the young folks, and asked them, well, what's going on in the schools, what's going on in the neighborhoods, right? And so another very much in alignment with that tenet of being responsive, we saw it as a crisis taking place, because so many young folks were being killed, were killing each other. And so that made it very real for us. Very real in the sense that, these are our younger sisters, our younger brothers that were having these lived experiences, these dehumanizing, these traumatizing lived experiences. So ethnic studies, aside from being an academic discipline, which it is, I think it's very important, but more so than that, it was responsive to the community. And it was something that we could act upon. That's what really differentiates and distinguishes ethnic studies, I believe, from other disciplines, in that there's a real world application to it. And there's a transformative component to ethnic studies where we can go through those processes with and for our students. Gracias.
I fell in love with ethnic studies in 11th grade. I was also in the Bay Area when ethnic studies, I think, found me through a teacher who fought for it. Somebody, I was in a workshop earlier who said, right, something to remember is that ethnic studies was never, it's not something that's given to us. It's always something that we've had to fight for and fight to maintain and to protect. And so I had a teacher that did that for us. And up until that point, I had never learned a history in where I could place myself and my ancestors. And ethnic studies gave me that gift. I'm mixed, I'm Chinese and Mexican. And while I had maybe learned about Chinese and Mexican people in some sense. It was through, right, a much more multicultural, filtered lens, in where our narratives were still told through a white gaze, right, through a very Eurocentric filter. And ethnic studies is really, oh, really, Curtis, you're gonna bring up my family?
I was waiting.
He just had that in his slide deck. Oh, that's my mommy and daddy. Ethnic studies, so in many ways, well, I don't know all of every part of the stories, it taught me to not be ashamed of my roots and to really embrace and to love them. And that's something that once that's in your veins, it never goes away. That's why ethnic studies isn't just a curriculum, it's not just the content, it's a way of life. And it breathes like everything in my veins. It breathes like fire. I always tell people ethnic studies raised me. And so when I think about what role like it plays in my life, it informs everything I do. And whether I'm teaching an ethnic studies class or I'm teaching a mainstream class, every course I've ever taught is just ethnic studies in disguise. So running this teacher ed program at Harvard until they really figure out what I'm doing. And I always think that, and I feel like that's something real too, is when you love, right, something or someone, and you really love them, like you're willing to lean into the pain or the struggle or the fight that comes with that. And I believe that, and I know that people, they fought, right? They bled, they were arrested, right? Outlawed for us to have ethnic studies, and so it isn't by accident. So when I teach the course even now, in a place as toxic as Harvard, I remind them, and I want them to know the roots, and we study the struggle and the fight in Tucson. We study the original strike at SF State, because it's important to know that this isn't just like all the other classes. And it isn't just a class, it's a way of life. And so that's a little bit about the role that ethnic studies has played and continues to play in my life. Thanks, Curtis, for bringing up all my business. Damn, just add those.
I'm a DJ.
I was like, what are they looking at? I saw your faces first. Thank you, Curtis.
So I thought, yeah. Turnabout's fair play. So that's my family. It's who I am to a large degree. My dad is in the corner. It's my wedding. My dad's over there. That's Samuel Acosta. And my mom is down here. They're divorced now. They're high school sweethearts. So, but I have to lead with the divorce because otherwise it gets like everybody's like, oh, and then it's like, oh no, they're not together. Trust me, it's a good. And then I have to go. Trust me, it's a good thing. You know, they're both remarried. It's really good. Anyway, but yeah, they're Mountain View High School, right? So now people know where Mountain View is because it's where your technology comes from, a lot of it and whatnot. So. But yeah, that's my mom, Sandy. And so, yeah, I'm a biracial kid that you really can't see on the outside. So I learned about racism real quick and having to make, having to make sense of who you are as a biracial. They didn't have names for us back then, right? I'm 47, almost 48. And so they only had negative names for us. Like the term biracial, I didn't even understand until, here until I was a teacher at Tucson High, which you'll see in a little bit. There's my grandpa and my abuelita, and I think that's important to ground. But I was taught to, and of course that's my amazing partner. Isn't she beautiful? That's Patricia. I'm lucky. I overachieved. And there's my Tia next to me. But anyway, I don't want to, and then it'll turn into like a slideshow of pictures of vacations. But yeah, so with all that love, I still had to navigate a real world out there in the 80s, right? And I was being taught in schools to hate myself as a Mexican. And I was a good student. I understood, which is really crazy because I have nothing but love when I look there at that brown, beautiful brown side of my family. But I remember like being able to compartmentalize my love for my family and my hate for being Mexican. How crazy is that? So that's sick. That's sick what happened to me. And so I had to detox, and I went to Tucson as part of that, right? And this is my classroom back in the day. Real proud of this picture. It says, "Welcome to Tucson High, home of the largest." Back in the day, we did the A and the O together, kind of, Chicano, Chicana together, and it was to symbolize, for those of you that like are, all the gender fluidity too, and everything in between, the A and the O and everything in between. But I understand why the X became more popular, because it's hard to say that, right? It turns into like Portuguese, and everybody wants to say Chicano or something like that, Chicano. And that's cool, but like, so I understand how the X came along, but there's something kind of romantic about everything in between too, right? So anyway, yeah, our program, was a healing space for me. My classroom was a healing space for me. So this vato over here is actually a huge part of my, of how I fell in love with ethnic studies, because when we formed the team behind Mexican American Studies Department, where Sean was a founder of the department, it really, it was a pathway to learning about myself. And so these young people here that you see, and that classroom it was where my liberation was born, and that never happens. And this is what it really is about, right? Not the born and dead date of our program, but the joy and the love. This is the last day of school, the class of 2009. And anybody that watches Precious Knowledge, you'll notice that's Priscilla down there, and that's Crystal. Those are two, and Gilbert's up in the back there. Boy, real bad pictures of all three of them. Actually, no, Crystal looks good. Actually, Crystal's okay, but the other two would be really mad that I shouldn't. But this was a typical, as you saw in the pictures, and in the words of my colleagues, and this is really what we're talking about, and how people in this country, and specifically in Arizona, found this as a vehicle to hate, right? As a piñata to hit, to criminalize that space is just, and that joy of finding ourselves together, in a way that was like liberatory for every experience and every identity. It's really important to emphasize that I was doing like queer lit in 2006 in Tucson. I kept waiting for them to like bring that up when they were coming at us. I'm like, wait do you read? That to me was obvious they weren't reading the stories I assigned. Because I'm like, oh, there's more for you, and you just keep scratching. But yeah, we knew we had to represent all of us, because I did not want what happened to me, that internalized oppression, that self-hate, to happen to any of my youth. And I also didn't want to be dogmatic, and we didn't, right? Because I was just one classroom in a program that we understood we needed to move with the times, and we needed to open up the space for our students to find themselves, right? And to critique the world, and to critique us, and to have the academic skills and the critical thinking skills and the love of learning and to do that. Because all our young ones, we're human beings. We love learning. Yes. We love learning. Some of your greatest teachers were not in schools. It's that schooling piece that can be really, really damaging. Yeah. So what happens? We were a testament to what happens when it is about learning in schools, when it is about humanity in schools, when it is about liberation. And that's how I fell in love.
So adding on to that idea, or that reality, that ethnic studies is not just a class, but it's a space of unlearning and unconditioning and being liberated. What did that look like, and what does that look like tangibly in the classroom? What are the principles and the tenets that ethnic studies classes are founded on?
Yeah.
So we brought these. And I would still say it's still not exhaustive, and part of ethnic studies, it continues to grow, both in relationship with and for our communities, not for the schools. Ethnic studies brings, I think, the wealth of our communities to help heal a lot of the harms that are within our schools, within the history textbooks. And so in terms of thinking about it in that way, so we're not gonna go through, I think, every single one in detail, although we'll go through some in tomorrow's workshop for those of you that are coming. But But I think a huge piece is knowing that identity piece on knowing your history, to know yourself. And I think one piece that I've been really thinking a lot about and making sure that I want my students to understand is we want to see ourselves reflected, but I think in Sean, what you were just saying, that you heard him in his story just share how he became more fully himself by understanding and learning Black history, right? And so no history, no self isn't just this like always inward navel gazing or seeing just you. Is how do I become more fully myself by understanding the history of the person to my left, to my right, in front of me, or what Curtis always says is 7 generations before and 7 generations after, and not a reflection that is just, right, just who I own, who looks just like me, but in how we each can become more fully human, which is the In Lakesh piece. That is another central kind of piece of ethnic studies, is what does it actually mean to embody that? Like, you are my other me. What does it mean to teach that and bring that into a kindergarten classroom? Right, we quoted Farima in the beginning, and that's the work she did in her classroom in Hayward, California, was not just saying, only look at your own history, but how does understand, and that is a true exercise in solidarity. Solidarity isn't like we all have the exact same goal. It really is like, no, how do I make sure that I show up and I will have your back if we have a goal, if we have similar goals around engaging in our humanity and our rights for our respective communities. So that's some of pulling out some pieces from there, or thinking of like which parts really resonate with you. Give it to one of you guys. Others? Yeah.
I forgot what I was gonna say.
Yeah, just looking at the first tenet there on identity, I asked myself, in being in these classrooms, being in these communities, knowing that my parents of the children that I'm working with are, I have to take care of them. It's a matter of life and death for my students. And so I gotta see them as my own children. So that's kind of the framework I go in. But going back to identity, a basic tenet of ethnic studies that we always talk about, that we've written about, that we put into practice is developing a positive image of self and community. So how do I do that? How do I do that with young Chicanx, Latinx youth, right? How do I do that with young Black youth? How do I do that with young Black women with and for, right? And how do I facilitate those processes? Because in order to get to any literacy development, any critical literacy development, if we're not addressing those basic socio-emotional needs and the lived realities that our students bring with them into the classroom every day, we're never gonna get to that point of developing those critical literacies that are necessary for our students to be, I hate to use the word successful, but to be able to negotiate these racist institutions, right? In this racist society that we live in. So these are tools that we are sharing and helping to develop these literacy skills, but the first and necessary step is that development, that positive development of self and community. Every time I open the school year, I ask my students, right now I work with a primarily Black and brown population in South Central Los Angeles, so I ask students to close their eyes and think of the word Mexican, right? And repeatedly, year after year, been doing this over 20 years. So what do you think, what are images or words that come to mind when you hear the word Mexican, right? Some beautiful thing, hardworking, right? Strong, resilient. But I always get the same responses, the negative responses as well. Those being criminal, right? Lazy, right? Deviant, et cetera, et cetera. And I get the same thing from the Black community too, the Black youth in my class. And so that's really telling of how much in these young people colonization has really negatively impacted them, because it's in our very psyches, right? And I say our, because we're doing this decolonial work, this decolonizing work along with our students, because we are subjects of the same colonization as our students. So as teacher facilitators, we really have to be intentional with that and keep that in mind and do this decolonial, this tough, introspective decolonial work with and for our youth. So again, going back to identity, a positive image of self and community, we need to develop that. And we need to think about, what are innovative ways, effective ways of doing that. Because when I did this 5 years ago, it's not the same as I'm doing it now. So it's context, it's time, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a constant life process.
I guess the one thing I would just add that that's all beautiful, is just the sacred part of it. I've done some reflecting and a little bit of writing lately, and one of the things we're trying to distinguish is what is the difference between culturally responsive and multicultural education and ethnic studies, right? And so when I was doing so, and I'm writing with V right now and a couple other colleagues, and I drew that one. That was the short straw. They're like, either everybody else wrote all this pretty stuff to write about, and I go, okay, great. And so when I was thinking about that, it was really that sacred piece that I was like, okay, that's what's different. And so then I have to how do I articulate that? Oh, okay. So multicultural education kind of came from educators, right? It came from colleges of education, let's just say, or even K-12 classrooms, let's just say. Culturally responsiveness, also, we can pinpoint it. It was Geneva Gay. It was Gloria Ladson-Billings. It's these amazing African-American scholars whom we've been fortunate to learn from and still learn from and with. So you can pinpoint it, those are scholars and they came from this. And the ethnic studies, although it's a formal discipline, right? And we can go back to SF State, we can go back to the Thorough Liberation Front and talk about the strike, and that is a huge part of our history, needs to be taught, and the other actions that happened throughout this country, right? Because it wasn't just at SF State, but it became a discipline at SF State in 1968. But really, when I was reflecting, my ethnic studies came from our ancestors, came from our abuelitas, our nanas, our tatas, as we would say in Tucson, and it came from your grandparents, right? It came from survivance. It came from knowing something so sacred, you're gonna hold on to it and give it, even if you're gonna get the lashes or you're gonna get the rope. And all of our families have gotten those, right? They all have in this country's history. So that's a big obligation and responsibility, right? Once you learn it, to live up to that. That's why it's sacred. That's why when we walk into our classrooms, it is not just, okay, class, turn to page 5, right? No, man, this is like even the space here, we had to make sure we invoked some type of sacredness into the communing together, right? And so that's a huge difference, is it comes from resiliency, resistance, and sacredness, right? This is what makes us more human than what we're being told we are. This is your key, mija, mijo, right? Hold on to this, right? And in all our different culturas, we've been given this, right? And so for the folks that share European American history and blood with me, I want to talk to you too. You are also products of colonialism. You too have been through this machine. So the thing is, if I may speak from that part of me to you all, is what are you going to do when you realize that? Are you going to be a part of dismantling this machine that has done this and be part of a liberatory effort with your brothers and sisters to the left and right of you? If that's the case, then you should be down for ethnic studies, right? You should be down for how this comes. And what comes of that is what we saw Kay do, actually, right? Even though she doesn't, she didn't say that she's from European American descent. That wasn't the ethnic, that's not her ethnic story. But she says she was checking her own privilege when she was in the Philippines. That kind of self-reflection, as Sean brought up, that Tezcatlipoca, is critical for all of us, right? And for those of you of European American descent, you need to practice that Tezcatlipoca, that self-reflection. Because
we have to look at things like privilege and power and how things, basic truths of this country, right? Slave labor, stolen land. And once we start there with honest conversation, right? Then we need to have those honest conversations at the dinner table, at the holiday meal, with the uncomfortable uncle who's gonna spout off all the MAGA stuff. You have to. That's your responsibility. Like it's our responsibility, if I could speak for my Chicanos, right? My Chicano-ness right now, right? That somebody held on to our sacred learnings so that I could do something with that in the classroom with our youth, because that's the only thing I'm good at. Well, now we try it with teachers too, right? We hope it works with them, because yeah. But I was really, I think I was strongest with the youth. That's my responsibility. We all have responsibilities, right? And are we going to be about that together? That is equality, right? Equality is, and that supposedly those are not only the tenets of how we should live in Nakesh, but those are the supposed tenets of this country. So some things to really think about. Who's being more American when you're being threatened by people wanting to live life, pursuit of happiness, liberty, those things, right? Because we know there's threats to everyone in this room. And we need to speak that clearly, and we need to speak that strongly. We need to have that courage with each other. And that just some things that connect a little bit to those tenets with me.
We just want to throw it back to you guys for some more self-reflection. So how did you find ethnic studies, or how did it find you? Maybe it was through this panel a couple of hours ago on Eventbrite or something, or maybe it was in a high school class, or maybe it was through your parents. So turn and talk with the people around you, and then we're gonna have a share out. Thank you. Just 3 people talking about it really exemplified this idea that everyone's talking about, not just intersectionality, but the idea that when you're seeing yourself, you're also seeing other people, and the beauty of being seen and feeling like you're not just a content area or someone who is an expert in knowledge of something, but that you're a human and that we connect on this human level. And so with grounding all of that, we also want to show this clip of what it tangibly looks like to see ethnic studies in action.
Now we're looking at the system. Can we create change with the system? Yes, we can.
What they started teaching us was so interesting. I just could not stop thinking about it. I would go home with articles and I would just read them over and over again. I started getting A's and B's.
Everybody take out So Far From God, because we're going to read a little bit today.
My class is the literature component, and it's called Latino literature.
Why do we think this is a church? Why do you think this is a Catholic church, just from the cover?
Because it looks like it's like in Mexico.
A church in Mexico. Southwest, even better. This looks like home. Right? This looks like where you from. It's a Chicano novel, right? You are in a world called magical realism. And it is a little bit different than fantasy. Because, you know, when you go to Lord of the Rings, everything's magical. When you go to Wizard of Oz, everything's magical. But in here, it's like, I got dumped by my novio, and now my sister's flying to the top of the roof. Now, why does that make sense for our gente? Why does it make sense that Latin America was the place where this happened?
I think it's something really big for me because I had the opportunity with Raza Studies to understand my cultura. I was always the quiet girl in the back that, like, I don't want to talk. I don't know what this is about. I'm scared to talk. He tends to teach us how to, like, express ourselves so we could have that confidence.
And when these stories haven't been around, when these stories haven't been on stage, when these stories haven't been in our history books, you become the historians.
With the tough kids, the ones with the thicker shells, you honor that they come to your classroom. And I know a lot of teachers are hesitant to use the word fun or entertaining, but I'm sorry. I'm going to use the gifts that I have, and if I can make them laugh, I'm going to make them laugh.
So say the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. So say the darker the Juice and roots are not true. It's not true rhyme. But slant rhyme allows you to have more freedom because back in the day when hip hop was starting, it was all true rhyme, right? It's like you know, like, we be cool, we go to school, we're gonna go swim in the pool. Or, you know, all that fat boys kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was like that. Wasn't it like that? It was like that. It was pretty cheesy.
I mean, really, how many teachers do you meet like that?
So then, yeah, it's like tricky and stuff, right?
Just to have him like down and like dancing in class and like throwing jokes and making fun of you, it's kind of like, okay, this is him, this is his personality. You know, on the level, that way you guys can just. I just feel comfortable here, you know. It's like a second home, I guess you could say. I mean, I hate it when I can't be here.
I want my kids to leave this classroom and not dive into just a bunch of Chicano stories and fiction. I want them to read Gatsby. I want them to read Mark Twain. I want them to read.
Right now we're reading The Devil's Highway, and both my parents read that because they heard that I was going to read it, so we can have discussions on it.
In every other class, I mean, you're just thinking about, oh, let's get this work done.
By the book, by the book, by the book, by the book.
But in this class, like, there's meaning to that word.
Let's get to work. Roll up your sleeves, and it's time to work.
They expect more from me. They challenge us more. They challenge me more.
I've never pulled an all-nighter for any other class.
It's something I need to do for my gente and my ancestors and me.
Are schools part of the community, or is the community part of the school? We choose the latter. Our communities need to be part of the school.
My colleagues and I, we're like a family. And then our students, as they come through, are very much like a family. So their family, then obviously your family.
Hey, what's up? How are you doing? Good. I'm glad you made it. Is everyone else here?
My mom?
Yeah, sure. Love to meet your mom, man.
A parent told me, she says, Augie, you know what? In the previous 11 years of my son's education, never did he come home and talk to me about what he was learning in school. I can't get him to shut up about this.
There's a lot of talk in this country about closing the achievement gap between white students and students of color. There's a program here in Tucson that is doing that.
You want to do that? No, that's a little embarrassing.
Was that from Precious Knowledge or is that from another? That was from Precious.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm supposed to use that, huh? Oh, we can use that one.
Sorry, I'm about to teach something, so I stood up.
And then he's like, no, you better walk him through what they just watched. I'm like, nah. It's hard to watch yourself, let alone 10, 12 years later, and then your neck is a whole different zip code. Yeah, I've only watched Precious Knowledge twice. After the second time, I noticed some weird things happening, and so I tried to watch it a third time. This is years ago. And I was noticing that first time was just, you're in awe of that moment of seeing. Jose said it well, that's my partner in crime there, literally crime, because we were criminalized. That was my social studies partner. Sorry, I got more close now all over. Laughing at my jokes. So, anyways, Jose said it after watching it the first time, it's like watching your memories, which is crazy. So, because your memories come from your vantage point, then all of a sudden you're seeing it, and you're like, wait a minute, some random school day, and then you see it this way, not that way. Anyway. And then the second time was in Tucson, and that's when I started noticing the rumbling inside me. But I thought it was like, maybe it was just the night, because it was a real stressful night. And then, because we were raising money for the lawsuit, so I had to go and like shake hands and kiss babies and stuff, because we were trying to fight the state, and we did for 7 years, right? Anyway. So then the third time I was in D.C. and I was like, just the beginning, I was like, no, trauma. And it took the third time for it to go, oh, this is not going to be good.
So it's, yeah, I don't watch it, and because of that, because that was a lot of loss. You know, that space was the most important space in my life to this point, right? Like physical space, because wherever my family is, that's, you know, my family, right? Like, you know, so we could be in a house, we could be in a hotel room all crammed in together in the car, and I get to be telling them to shut up, and that's a lovely space, right? That's my two mocoso sons and my partner, but a physical space that was transformative for hundreds of students and myself included, right? Co-construction and co-conspirators in healing, co-conspirators in trying to make our school a better place, our community. That's gone. I had to take all those pictures off the wall, everyone. And so to do my own ethnic cleansing. Books were banned and boxed, you know. So it's hard. So yeah, but the point being, right? So that was our yoke to bear, and no crying. Like, I'm very proud that I had the opportunity to be in a lovely space, and also very proud that we survived it being ripped from us. Because now we can show people that, look what we did. And not only look what we did in the classroom, but that's what I'm supposed to talk about right now, but also look what we did by not bending the knee, as they say in Game of Thrones. And we never, right? At least I can look at that homeboy, right? He can look at me forever. And we know, the two of us know, we never complied. Never complied to what the federal courts later said, racial animus against Mexican American youth and people in this country. So, with that being said, that's what it looks like in the classroom. It can look like normal school, except for, you know, it's a bunch of, in this case, like, you know, black and brown kids and a couple vanillas sprinkled in there at the time, right? Like learning together and being excited about it, right? But sometimes it would look boring because we were like writing, and writing can look boring if you come in, like, because we used to have people come in all the time, watch the Mexicans learn. And then they came, then they did state surveillance to make sure, like, that we had to go through that period too. But there was a time period when we were hot, right? Before, well, we were still under attack, but we were people in the education, research, and the stuff we do now, right? Like, we got our PhDs and all that stuff. And those people were really excited about what was going on in Tucson. And so they came, I used to make a joke that they should just knock out the wall and put up, like, plexiglass so they can, like, you could just come by and put some Latin that says Mexicanus learnus, you know, and like, oh, because it was like zoo. It felt like you were in the zoo sometimes. They're just random people, and they'd be like sitting there smiling, like, and our students would be like, who are these people? And just ignore them. I don't know. And then later they came to make sure we weren't teaching anything Mexican. So we had visitors all the time. So any questions from you about any reactions to what it looks like? Any questions about it implemented in a classroom before I do this little teaching knowledge drop kind of fun? Yeah, yes, sir.
I like the idea that you were changing minds, and the parents. I mean, normally parent-teacher conference, I'm sure they're practically empty. But when the children started to learn, they started to drag their parents to teacher conference.
Yeah.
Mom, I want you to meet my teachers, so and so and so. And come, like the girl said, oh, you want to meet my mom? Come meet my mom. And the mother was so proud that her child was learning. She said from 11th grade, her child was, I mean, you were literally changing minds and thoughts of how they see themselves in the world today. And that's very important. That's very important because they're going to go up against those stereotypes that they've been taught, seen on television, animated, whatever. They're going to prove that what we learned all these years was a lie.
Yeah, just if I may, sir, thank you for the remarks. Yeah, we really have to solidify ourselves in that positionality that we are servants of the parents, right? Again, they pay their salaries, that's their babies, the most prized possession they're placing into our hands. That's frightening, right? That was frightening for myself and my two young ones when they went into K-12 schools. But going back to, talking about books in here, right? One of the things that this became, because it was ethnic studies, is it became a family literacy project. Because students would take our books and they'd take them home and then the parents would jack them, right? They paid for them, they should be able to take them, right? So year after year, we'd have to get, Zoot Suit would have to be replenished. Luis Rodriguez is Always Running, Occupied America, because the parents would take them and then they would start reading them. And that's a good problem to have, right, folks? When the parents start jacking your books, it's engaging, right?
One of my favorite little stories is tiny, so don't worry, I got you. Is one time I was collecting books at the end of the year and I get one back and it's not even on my list anymore. I'm like, what's this? Oh, we've had it in our family for about 5 years. Now my brother took it and we just kept it. And because the parents read it and then they're like, well, you're gonna take this class, so just keep it. You can give it back at the end. It's a 5-year cycle. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
So thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. One of the things or reasons it resonated with me is because my mom was a history teacher in North Carolina and did a similar initiative to infuse African American content into the North Carolina history curriculum. But the stunning thing to me was the amount of pushback she got just for that very mild. I mean, she wasn't talking about a separate class. She wasn't talking about a separate track or major or whatever. It was just, let's interject this into the history of our state, which of course, should have been there all along. But I wondered how you all dealt with your colleagues who taught history without the ethnic studies component and literature without the, and the kind of well-meaning would-be accomplices that kind of didn't have your back when it was important to have your back.
Well, the statute of limitations is up. We can talk out of school now. Yeah, we have some resistant stories that we'll save for another day. But I can tell you that we were consistent. If you were demonizing our students and their familias, we were gonna come visit you collegially. It's just, for a lot of those folks, that just being accountable is tough. So you don't really have to go, in the back of the truck. Or in the trunk, I should say, out here, because you don't have trucks out here as much as we do in Tucson. But yeah, it was just an illusion. No, but seriously, us advocating, showing that strength was sometimes so people felt it was hostile because we chose not to take it. So one story, there was a person we taught with at the school that told Priscilla that her history was fake. All right, oh, you're studying that fake history. This is a girl who was taking 2 history classes, right? Simultaneously. She was taking Sean's, she was also taking my literature class, but she was taking literature, she was taking Chicanics, we would say now, studies, and then she was also taking AP, right? And so when she went in to sign up, register for classes, she'd already done it in our classes, right? In our history, because it was they pick one discipline, so this content area, to do the registration, and they picked history, and so she was studying for our classes because they're harder, and straight up, and so more engaging, right? And so she's studying, and he said that to her. So we couldn't let that stand. I mean, that's one thing to tell us. We could have that discussion, right?
But to tell a young person, 16, 17, no, that's crossing the line. Like, that's a big line to cross, right? So us standing up for that became a to-do. And it was tough on, it's tough on our principal too, because he was a coward, right? And so he didn't know, and he's Chicano. Yeah, and he didn't know how to advocate for her like we did. And so we had to run an investigation, this, that, the other thing. Yeah, so it got messy, and it would get messy. We, all sorts of things. But most of the time it didn't get to that, but yeah, shady stuff would happen like that to our students all the time. So we taught them later, we became more vigilant about flat out teaching them, because we started thinking, oh, look at all the different spaces. Sean said this years ago, and I never forgot it. It was, we're trying to teach our youth, or expose our youth, and cultivate in our youth the ability to navigate the multiple cultural spaces in their lives, right? Right? If you think about it, like we had 7 period days at Tucson High, so like, how many spaces is that? If you include like the hallways, right? 7 teacher spaces and the hallways, and then we have, they call it the mall, right? For our, it was just the strip of the plaza, right? And so, there's different spaces there, all these different crews, right, that line up and sit up and what up, all these different groups, cliques, we would probably say, right? There's a lot of spaces to navigate. So we were like, hey, if you ever get, run into this stuff, this is how you handle your business. And we also did that intentionally right before, some call it Thanksgiving, we call it Things Taken. Right? Like, I owe that to Blue Scholars NGO, right? The hip hop group from back in the day in the 2000s. But yeah, so we go, hey, it might get a little tricky if you bring up this is a colonizer holiday, this, that, the other thing, right? At the table Tata's passing the turkey, or the cranberry sauce, right? Like we're just trying to watch the football game. So you had to teach about being, and I remember us talking about our bad holiday stories with our youth, so they would laugh and stuff like that. But we were just really explicit from that point and transparent about, hey, this is how you handle your business in a respectful way. You got to always practice this concept of inakesh, which we'll get to eventually tonight too. I don't know what time we're at because I kind of go on and on. Oh, we're getting close. Yeah, I'm gonna shut up. Yeah, so what makes sense now? Should I do this or wait till the end? Let's wait till the end. Okay, so back to the.
No, I would just love to hear everyone just keep going all night. But I love when you just spoke about, just mentioning the word hallways, the idea that ethnic studies is, as you've all said, is not just a classroom, and it's not just something that can be contained, but it's a way of life. It's a way of having love permeate your school community. And we're in a really contentious time in our New York City Department of Education for all the right reasons. And this resistance came long before me and my generation, and long before our parents and the people before us. But is there anything specific that you can say to me as like a 17-year-old trying to do this in my high school, or as all the people in this audience, how do we make this not just in our classrooms, but in our hallways, in our hearts, in our minds, and in every part of what we live?
They've heard from the men too long. It's bad for them.
One is, I think you can't stop, right? I think that's a big piece. One of my approaches is I always ask questions. So when I have those resistant, because I get them too, right? They ask me, I have questions right back. And I think that's like an important technique, because it also then puts the onus on the person who's trying to accuse you, right? Or trying to criticize what it is you're doing. The other piece is knowing, I think people, and we all know this, but you cannot do it alone. And so really fine. So when we talk about solidarity, which is the piece that I know we're moving towards, right? Isang Baksak. That solidarity piece is so clutch and important. And it is in figuring out how do you build those alliances. And we have talked about, I heard it in our other workshop earlier, is we don't need allies. And even accomplice, that's super dope also. That's a wonderful idea of you have something to risk. But ethnic studies is also about, to move towards being comrades. What does that mean? Because then there's something loving in that I'm going to ride or die for you, and that what we're doing is not criminal. that what we're doing is actually for us, for all of us in this. So I think continuing to I think try to teach people, I think that language, pushing them outside of their comfort zones, embracing the pieces around, I get asked like, oh, isn't it so depressing to constantly talk about, teach oppression? I'm like, not as depressing as suffering from it, not being able to name it. You know, and that's what ethnic studies, like, it gives us voice, it gives us tools, and and then asking, why wouldn't you want your child to learn it? And when you just give somebody, I think when you just continue to ask questions, knowing and embracing that can get really messy and that there's no promises on it not being, I think, a contentious, messy process, because it has always, we've always existed in struggle. And I think that, I definitely recommend, if you haven't picked up Dr. Tina Love's book, We Want to Do More Than Survive. She talks about abolitionist teaching. She says, right, to want freedom, to want justice is to welcome struggle. So when people have questions, like we have to really think about what does it mean to embody, to give your heart and your life to that, and that ethnic studies are reminding people it isn't cognitive. It's not all here. We can learn a lot of things here. That's not what I'm interested for my students. I want it to be in your core. And it's not, there's no certain things I can tell you. I want to create an experience for you to really feel it, and that is a different kind of learning that I think ethnic studies offers to us. So I think as many continuous conversations you can try to have, making sure you're not doing it alone. Those are just some, and I know that that's not exhaustive, but that's the first thing that I think comes to mind.
I guess I would say just the spirit of being able to question is really pivotal, because it shows us that an inviting question is what V just articulated, shows that this isn't a dogmatic, ideological, replacement of the dogmatic, ideological project that's been done to us. It's the opposite. It's a liberatory invitation, right? That we don't know where we're gonna land. There's some beauty in that, and it's messy. And so I've often talked with folks who are of the other. I reject binaries, but have this like they like that old school dogma, about Eurocentric. This is the myths of this country. These myths are true, right? And you're like, well, what about this perspective? What about that? They hate those questions, and that makes sense. Like, just think about every time, especially when we're growing up and we're learning things. When we're asked questions and we don't have the answers, we get frustrated and Hulk mad, Hulk angry, Hulk break. And that's usually what happens really fast. And very powerful people will make it break in a really, really violent, hostile, and dehumanizing way. And so it's up to us to continue to love them through that and to model for them how this process really is supposed to go. To embrace the messiness and to really understand who you are, right? One of the things that trips people out all the time is I choose to say European American about my heritage, and and then I ask, why you don't identify that way? Some people don't. They say they're white. I go, who chose that for you? Where's Whitelandia? I can tell you the etymology behind the term Chicano. I know where it comes from. I know where it's at. I can point to it on the globe, right? But and Baldwin said, right? And then Coates parroted it later, in a good way, Coates, right? I'm not dissing Ta-Nehisi right now. He said, the people who think they are white, right? That ain't it, man. So, there's a lot of questions that we have to keep asking ourselves as human beings in this messy time. What am I doing? Am I doing this? We gonna close it up? All right. I'm gonna teach a little bit. All right. So here we go, y'all. All right. So the ethnic studies mixtape is actually what we do with teachers and educators and youth. When sometimes we're get that opportunity too.
And so a lot of what we do as a collective, right, with our consulting and just the way we is really teach. All we do is we teach, right? We teach adults what we model, right? We model what we do in the classroom. So here's a model, right? I'm not the history teacher, Sean is, but this comes from our homie Carlos Hagedorn, one of our dear friends who's on our team with us. And this picture, can anybody tell me, who do you see in this picture? Okay, good. I heard Cesar Chavez. All right. That was my answer too. Remember, I'm the literature guy. So I'm like, I got one, right? And then you try to start making some of the women Dolores. It's not, right? Those of you that know Dolores Huerta, she ain't up there. So the question I'm going to come back to you with is a really beautiful question that Carlos does with folks, and thus now we do it too because we've learned from him, is who do you see there? There you go. Women, men, children. You see babies, right? See the tall vato right there? He got a baby. Teaches you something about, hey, men, take care of your babies, right? We know how to do that. This is a black and white photo. There's documented proof. We don't even know if that's his baby. He could just be borrowing that baby right now for the community, right? You know what? I'm just going to be a daddy right now for this baby. That's beautiful. What else do you see? What about their reactions? Joy, happy.
Hope.
I heard hope. What else? Determination. Yeah. Sometimes pride. What are they doing? They're marching. Excellent. Some of you know somebody that looks like what they're doing. It is what they're doing. Right? Huelga. What's that mean? Strike. Protest. Right? Yeah. So they're striking, right? Do you notice any other things that may give it away about what this is about? It is a strike. Well, yeah. What about that symbol? I heard it. It's the eagle. Yeah. United Farm Workers. Thank you. See, so all the wisdom's in the room. Right? You just my partly deaf self can't hear it all too well. So you're nice and patient with me. So yeah, that's what you got. You got this is the United Farm Workers. This is a marcha from Delano, California, all the way to Sacramento, California, to the capital, right? They marched all the way, right? And they look so miserable doing this. So we love showing this to people because sometimes when we do this work with teachers, and most 80% of teachers in this country are European American descent. So like they'll hear about like this is the culture group and this and that, and I made a joke earlier, and it's not a joke. This is literally sometimes folks come in and they say, "Is this where I get to learn to be racist today?" And our reaction to that is like, question, right? I don't know, maybe. Maybe today's the day we find out. You get to find out that this, yeah, you are. I don't know. We'll find out together. It'll be exciting. You ready for it? But I can tell you one thing. It's going to be joyful. We're going to have a good time doing it. We're going to have a good time finding out you're racist. There's power in naming. He just told us. Yeah, so anyway, no, this is joyful work, y'all. Finding out who we are and learning the story of others is joyful work. Go ahead, sis. Anybody recognize that gentleman next to Cesar? Larry Elong. Well done, New York. Huh? Yeah, okay, yeah. Right, we all Bay Area kids, by the way. So yeah, this is Larry Elong. Everybody, say it together. 1, 2, 3. Larry Elong. One more time. Huh? I can't. Eat Leon. Okay, Larry Eat Leon. All right, there we go. Larry Eat Leon. All right. Who is he?
Filipino organizer.
Excellent. He was organizing before the Cesar and Dolores came with the United Farm Workers to start doing that business, right? He was doing it already with the Pinay Pinoy community, the Filipina Filipinos, right? Your people, right? What do we know about Larry? And is what Sister was talking about right now. When Dolores, Dolores' idea, like we got to go talk to Larry because he's the one, he's already been doing this. So that shows deference. So there's people in New York already doing this work. So there's no way when we go to places, we never go in there and go, okay, y'all, this is where we get to put all our stuff. I tell people we're the anti-binder consultants, right? We don't come in with our caca and think our caca is going to work just because it worked in Tucson. It's going to work in New York. All right? It's going to work in the boroughs. No, we're not stupid. Y'all the experts. They did the same thing back in the day. they went to Larry and said, hey, Larry, you're already doing this. We're in deference to that. But you want to do this together? Now, what do you know about the struggle? Did it work? Did the United Farm Workers struggle eventually get some of the things it was asking for, right? Better human rights, working conditions, things like that. Pesticides banned. They banned the short hoe, right? The handheld hoe, which deformed folks. Pesticides that was deforming babies. A lot of that stuff was rectified. So something had to happen there. In that, Larry had to say, no, he didn't say no, get away, it's mine, I did it, right? He had the grace, right? He had the grace and selflessness to know that he had to work in solidarity if they were going to get what his people needed. That's the lesson we got to roll with, right? Keep going, sis. When it comes to fierce women doing this work, right? We think of Dolores Huerta, right? A partner in this struggle, right? So we think about the idea of what patriarchy's done to our sisters, right? That we're all a part of dismantling these systems that have been so dehumanizing. And they're more than just ethnicity and cultura. We got to look at other things too. And she's a good example of that. And a good example of standing up. So we like to honor her. So with that spirit, go ahead. We want to honor the Pinay Pinoy community, right? We learned this from ethnic studies teachers in San Francisco, right? Isang bagsak. Say it with me. Isang bagsak. Does anybody know what that means? One down. Oh, yeah. You do. Does anybody know what it means figuratively? Don't push it. Any wisdom in the room about what it means figuratively? It literally means one down, but figuratively, go ahead, sis.
What might it mean?
All right. It expands, right? To these definitions. One thing achieved, or things can't get done if people don't communicate and work together. Those 4 syllables have this movement. It's a movement phrase, right? It also symbolizes if one falls, we all fall. If one rises, we all rise. So that's the story that we want. That's the spirit we want to leave this place with, right? And we got this again from our Pinay brothers and sisters in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. They were like, we do what y'all do with the clap, but we added this, because this is what they did back in the day during the meetings. They said, Isang bagsak. And that would be the one, the clap would happen, like this, right? And then somebody would go, Isang bagsak. And there would be one last clap, stomp, or grito. Anybody got a grito for me right now? Me in New York. That was a New York check. A grito is a yell, right? It's late. It's 8 o'clock. I took you too late tonight, right? Ahua, right? And it's something good. All right, so anyways, will we all do it together in unison? So that's what we're going to do. And one more piece of the ceremony, right? After I lead us with Isang bagsak, and the clap, and I yell, Isang bagsak, go ahead. We're going to read In Lakesh together as a close. So this is knowledge that we got from the Mayans, right? Indigenous knowledge to this hemisphere, these continents, right? West side knowledge, Western Hemisphere. So what we're going to do is we're going to read the words of Luis Valdez, what he tried to symbolize in English and Spanish, right? Spanish and English, if we read it from left to right, what it meant to him, what In Lakesh meant to him. This is something that I read with my students every day before class. So 5 periods a day. We did it every day. Every period. As a way of reminding ourselves why we're in that space together. So we thought we'd flip it. Instead of starting our day, we thought we'd end our evening this way. Clapping it up, Isang bagsak, and then In Lakesh. So I'm going to say, after we clap it up, I'm going to say In Lakesh. Right? After we do Isang bagsak, I'm going to say In Lakesh. Then you're all going to read with me from Spanish to English. Tu eres mi otro yo, you are my other me. All right? Now check it out. Some of y'all, some saying some funky words for the first time in your life up here. And then some of y'all are reading the Spanish. So you gotta just
get in where you fit in, right? It's all good. But some of you are bilinguals, right? You're crazy milagros in Spanish and English right now. I gotta ask you one favor. Chill. This ain't your time to flex. This ain't the time for the swag in your bag. All right? You gotta be leaders right now. Because we're gonna read this communally, corally, like collectively, like a family. So some folks in here, like myself, got Dusty Dora the Explorer Spanish. So you're gonna have to practice empathy with me as I go through this, right? In other words, you gotta practice in Lakesh while you read it. You have to think of your other me and what your other me might be going through as we read the poem that's about thinking about the world being your other you. Y'all got it? See, that's that teacher Jedi stuff. There's a lot of directions. Does anybody have a little, anybody got to, want me to clarify, or are you good? All right, you're like, it's Saturday night, let's go. All right, you ready? In Lakesh.
Tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you, me hago daño a mí mismo. I do harm to myself. Si te amo y respeto, if I love and respect you, me amo y respeto yo. I love and respect myself.
Thank you very much. It was our honor to share whatever we had as a gift to you all. Thank you for your gifts back. And we're in solidarity with you, New York, and whomever else is in the room. All right? We love you. Good luck. Hopefully you bring this all forward, and we're going to change this country and change this world together.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being present with us, for being powerful with us. Let's give it up one more time for Dr. Rosa, Dr. Austin, and Dr. Deborah. I think that's the end.
Yes.